Welcome to Tracing Your Family Roots. My name is Sallyann Sack. This is Sallyann Sack. And today we're going to talk about the International Tracing Service. Now that might sound like we've talked about this before because we very recently did a show on it. But we talked then about the records that are being released and being sent to other archives like the Holocaust Museum and Yad Vashem.
Right.
So now we're going to talk about what's there. And why did you and Gary go there?
Well, first we have to say that in the middle of December 2007, Gary Mokotoff and I made a very quick trip to Bad Arolson, Germany, to visit the International Tracing Service, the Red Cross. We left on a Saturday night and then came back on a Wednesday. So it was we spent Sunday evening with the director and then Monday and Tuesday all day at ITS. We went because the person we interviewed on our previous show, remember we interviewed Paul Shapiro, who's head of advanced Holocaust research at the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. I was talking to Paul, and he said, you know, for genealogists, the most valuable records are likely to be the TD files. And I said, oh, what are the TD files? I know that Yad Vashem, when it filmed files in the 1950s, didn't film TD files. What are they? He said they're the correspondence files.
Yes.
So
well, that means they should have my name because I wrote there and asked for information.
Right, and they have my correspondence. I took a copy of those films. You may recall that Paul said that the ITS, which is, by the way, the largest collection of Holocaust-related material in the world, that archive.
We just had a picture in back of us on that. That's
where we went. Okay. Well, the story, just for viewers who haven't seen this, the story is that this archive, the tracing service was created by the Allies during World War II. After the war, they asked the International Committee of the Red Cross, which is headquartered in Zurich, Switzerland, to administer it, which it has done all these years, and it's been closed to the public, and there's been a lot of aggravation about that.
Yeah, well, the only way you could get something is to write a letter.
And wait 2.5 years.
Yes.
There are hundreds of thousands of unanswered letters, or there were. But last fall, thanks really only to Paul Shapiro, it finally was opened. There's an 11-country governing council that finally agreed to change the charter a little bit, and they added an amendment, which I think is worth reading a little bit because it tells us why we went. They said the amendment is to ensure access for research purposes to archives and documents preserved by the ITS, both on site and through copies of the archives and documents. Yes, the Holocaust Memorial Museum is getting materials, but this collection of TD files, which is one of 8, originally wasn't scheduled to be copied. The European members were again worrying about privacy, didn't want them. These were people who wrote, after World War II, wrote saying, what happened to my mother, father, sister, brother, or people who filled out, as we found when we went there, claims for restitution, or you and me who wrote. All of that is in the TD stands for Tracing Documents in English. I don't know what it means in German. German is the language of ITS. But those originally weren't going to be filmed. Then blessed Paul Shapiro got the idea he should look at them, and he realized the value to a genealogist especially, and he insisted they be filmed, and the governments complained, and they struck a bargain.
Didn't you say there were like 50 million index records?
Right. So wait a second. So the records that are 25 years old won't be copied, although you could send letters to those and see if they get ITS will forward letters. But all the early correspondence, the post-war, is going to be copied. But the hooker is they're not going to start copying it until January 2010.
Oh, that's another few years.
That's a few years from now. So when Paul told me that, immediately I said, well, could we take a group of genealogists to Arolson to do research? And he looked at me and he said, I don't see why not. And so he arranged an introduction for me to Reto Meister, who is the new director of ITS. I can't tell you enough about how wonderful this man is. We agreed, Gary and I would go. And so our purpose was to see if it was feasible to bring researchers and whether it made sense And I can only say our answer was a resounding yes. Yes.
Now, you are planning on a group of up to 40?
Yes.
So,
we originally marched in and said we'd like to bring 50. They paled. And after a day, they said, well, could we make it 40? And we said, well, what's the problem? And they said, the problem is in this little townlet, I guess it's a village, 4,000 people, in northern Hesse, most people don't speak English. And so because of the way the records were arranged, you really need a lot of staff input. The people at the Holocaust Museum are undergoing training to be able to help you, but I want to tell you, they have, the place you start is with the Central Index of Names. They had originally 50,000 pieces of paper, file cards.
50 million.
50 million, excuse me, representing 17.5 million different people. Every time a document arrived with a name, a card was created. So if there were several documents for the same person, several cards. But they wrote abbreviations on those cards.
Oh, the Germans and their abbreviations.
And they've now been digitized. They've filmed all these, and the Holocaust Museum has this central index, and they're even getting an English language interface. Gary and I used it in German. But to really understand those cards, to know what those abbreviations mean and the notes on the back,
You need a dictionary of abbreviations.
you need a staff person.
Oh.
So what they're prepared to do, they're essentially going to close down their operations for a week to accommodate us.
Wonderful.
They're going to have 20 computers and 20 staff people. And one staff person will work with 2 people at a time. So you will have all week long access to the Central Index of Names. Now, I marched 25 years ago. I wrote to them and I said, listen, I'd like everything you have on everybody named Slumovitz from Salatvina, from Marmarosh County, Hungary, because they're all related to me. And after a while, I got an answer back saying, we don't work that way. We can't do it that way. But now I did it. So I sat at the Central Index and they photocopied. By the way, they will photocopy within half a day everything you ask for, so that you may get something in a document that sends you then to further research. So maybe you would like to see some of what I got?
Yes, let's take a look at...
Let me tell you, I had 2 relatives first of all, I did all my Slumovitzes. Then I knew about a relative of mine whose daughter is my close friend and second cousin. And I had heard a story that Eli Cohen was his name, had been in the Hungarian forced labor brigades. And after the war, he had been unable to get restitution, though he applied. And I found out a few years ago by corresponding with the former director that the problem was that when Eli Cohen filed for restitution, somebody must have been helping him, and the poor man must have been confused, because they must have asked for his wife's name. I have a document that shows that. The next line was maiden name of mother. The poor man thought they were asking for his wife's mother's maiden name, and instead of giving his mother's maiden name, he gave his wife's mother's maiden name. And they have records with his mother's maiden name, so when they got this guy, it wasn't the same person. So it says on this document, Mutter, which you tell me is mother, which even I know is mother, and it says Kaufman Sarah. Kaufman Sarah was the maiden name of Rosa Weiss's mother. And you can see it's in English, partially in English. And see over here,
Kaufman Sarah.
And so the mystery is solved. The question is it too late? It probably is. The man is deceased. Though he had put in an application, so now
his children should try it on that basis.
They are trying to do that.
Because, yes, the official date was some years ago where you could get it.
And also for the forced labor, children could get it if the claim was made while the slave laborer was still alive.
And that was certainly made, so theoretically, it depends how the courts go, of course, and what they...
And I think there may even be a date, not on this one. Then I looked up my maiden name, because Amdur is not a common name, and I found wondrous things. Their cross-indexing of individuals is so great that they often ask for maiden names. They almost always ask for maiden names of women. So it pulled up some documents of women whose maiden names were Amdur. One woman wrote to them in 1987 from Petah Tikva, Israel. So now I can pursue her. I also found, and I won't show it to you because of privacy, I found another Amdur who I had never known about, and we've put our Amdur website up. And the amazing thing about him was apparently he survived the Vilna Ghetto with his wife and 5 children born 1934, 36, 39, 42, and 45.
Oh my God, they were born during.
They were born during the war.
How did they hide?
I don't know anything about it, and I have an address for him in Holon, Israel, from the post-war period, plus the names of all his children. I don't think he's alive, but I hope I can
find some
hit
children.
One of his 3 sons. So,
yeah, well, you know the people in Israel to write to who look up the names.
Right, and we all can do that. It's not that difficult. Then I came up with one that I think is really amazing.
The one with the age difference.
The one with the age difference, Freddy Amdur, or Fred it says here. He's also known as Freddick or Freddie Margulies. Fred was adopted by my aunt and uncle, and he came to Cleveland in the summer of 1947, and we were the same age. I remember very well spending the summer with Freddie. But I saw on these documents, to my intense surprise, that here he's listed as June 1936, which was the birth date that I know, and I will tell you he was, at 47, he was a skinny little 11-year-old boy. Here, and you can't see the whole document, same person, 1925, an 11-year difference. No way the skinny little kid who came to Cleveland was 22 years old. And yet on the document, well, I have several, it's clearly the same person.
Yes, it says Amdur Fred, former name Margulis.
Exactly. So the big mystery, and then here's the mystery. This, according to these documents, he was a 4-year-old child when he was taken into the ghetto.
And
he was liberated from Auschwitz at the age of 9, from Buchenwald. How did he survive?
And he survived a work camp.
He was sent to a work camp in 1942. They'd sent children. We learned things you wouldn't believe. They had certain kinds of work that needed tiny hands.
Remember in Schindler's List that they were using the little children to do certain things.
That's exactly right. And that undoubtedly is why Freddie survived. I found in most of the documents his mother's name is unknown. One document had his mother's name and her maiden name. So what's in these documents? Things you would not believe you could find. They gave us as I said, they couldn't have been nicer to us. They gave us a booklet prepared specially for us. And one of the things that I must tell you about, Arlene, here they have all these people who obviously show up with different variations of their name. One section of this booklet has Abramovich equals 849 variations.
Now we should have a picture of that we can see it back here. You can't read it, of course, but it's just columns and columns and columns.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages, 7 pages. They have designed their system very brilliantly. But that is not to say that there aren't errors in it. I showed you 2 examples.
Well, if you have 50 million records, you're bound to have some.
Right. But basically, what kind of records do they have? They have pre-war, they have wartime, they have post-war. But you had to have somehow gotten into the system, the Nazi system, to be in the records.
Now, do they have just those that were in, like all the lists of the people that were in the concentration camps?
They have many lists. They have, let's take a look at the list.
So that anybody who was in a concentration camp should at least have one record of theirs?
Well, not anybody, unfortunately. If the concentration camp was in the Allied zone of occupation, meaning the French, the British, or the American, they'll have it. If it was in the Russian zone, no. They don't know why. They didn't get records from the Russians. Whether the Russians destroyed the records or whether they took them to Moscow, they still don't know.
Well, they might find them in Russia someday.
Right. Well, now,
they found other things like Evo records.
So, for example, incarceration before the war, prisoners' personal cards, personal effects cards, labor assignment cards, death certificates. Now, we saw there, they uncovered in the basement of one of the buildings, there's 6 buildings, personal effects from Neuengamme concentration camp. They are now in the business of writing to people and saying, Would you like the purse that once belonged to your mother or your grandmother?
Oh my God.
Would you like the eyeglasses?
Oh, so they really know who's...
They know who they belong to. Let me tell you, these Nazis, they made lists, and they were short of paper, Arlene. Some of the cards are cut from cigarette cartons. And the backs of them are cigarette things, and then they filled out file cards.
I'll tell you something that happened to my father.
Tell it louder so our viewers can hear.
I'll tell you something that happened to my father when he was able to get out of Buchenwald.
He was in Buchenwald?
Yes. In 1938, starting the day after the...
I thought it was Dachau.
No, he was in Buchenwald. The day after the... Kristallnacht, and he was there for just 10 days, or 11 days. And when he came to the front, and he said, I want my wedding ring back. And they said, that's nonsense. There's a whole... Here's the bag of effects. They open it, and there's his wedding ring right on top. So he was able to get his wedding ring back.
Was it marked with his name?
Oh, he had his name on it, and the date he got married, of course. You know.
Amazing. Because that's
very unusual.
They had lists of arrivals, roll calls, transport lists, medical examinations, consultations, and sick wards. Then we go to... that was the incarcerate. Yeah. Then we go forced labor. Labor books and cards, health and social insurance cards, employer records, marriage, death,
and birth
records, lists of companies, health records, deceased records, burial sites. Did you hear about the head lice?
Head lice.
They have one collection of head lice counts.
Oh, of course, we had...
Paul Shapiro talked about it.
Yeah, but we had somebody that talked about it.
And they're listed only by number, not by name. But at Arolson, they have an index. If you have just the name, it'll tell you who the person was.
Just the number, you mean? They'll tell you.
The number.
Yeah.
Post-war documents, DP cards, records for care and maintenance, medical files, UN files, registration lists, repatriation lists, emigration and shipping lists. These are fabulous for people who survived. And I didn't know who survived. But I looked up names. They also have correspondent general documents, witness accounts, prison and concentration camps, and SS office
Now, I think we need to point out that this is not only Jewish.
Not only, most is not Jewish. And Lebensborn files. Do you know what the Lebensborn was? This is where they took children who looked like Aryans and took them away from their parents and gave them to Nazis to adopt.
Well, not only that, they took the women. You were encouraged, the Christian women that were blonde and blue-eyed were encouraged to mate with blonde and blue-eyed men, and they kept the children separate and all that.
They have all that whole thing. Now, here in these, because it was set up to find individuals, you cannot go in and say, I want to see everybody from the town of. Though they are now working on it, the way you can with the Yad Vashem list. They're going to do something about that. Neville Lambdin, who is the director of the International Institute of Jewish Genealogy in Jerusalem, told me he was interested in a certain town in Belarus, Bernovici. And he said, I know that there were 3 actions where they took the Jews out and shot them. And in order to know who the Jews were, they made lists. We know they made lists of who the Jews were. Will you see if you can find the lists of names of the Jews of Bernovici? So we went to the non-personal records, and they have a file. It's not digitized yet. They look up and they find one card for Bernovici. They run and they get the file, and it's a chapter from a book, and there's one name of a witness. One person survived. So all I could give Lambdin was this one name, and he said, that's great. And I gave him the reference. He said, I'll track him down. So there are that kinds of things. And then there's this central name index.
Yeah, you said there were 50 million names. It's incredible.
50 million cards, but 17.5 million people.
But I can't even picture 50 billion pieces of paper lined up.
You saw that picture of me on the ladder?
Yeah.
Goes up to the ceiling now, those cards.
And anybody could go. I mean, if you're those 40 of us that are, I'm going to go. Those 40 of us that are going to go can go climb this ladder. Are they going to?
We'd be silly to do it because it's all in the computer.
Oh, that part is okay.
Those are all in the computer, though. If for some reason you need to look at originals, you can. One of the photocopies that they gave me. I told you I found Freddys Mother's maiden name. There's a stamp across it, so I can't read her whole maiden name. So when I go back, I'm going to ask to see the original and hold a magnifying glass, see if I can do it. So I guess what I want to say is I've been to ITS twice. I'm the only person I know who's been to ITS with the old director and the new. There's no comparison. It's unbelievable. The archivist, this wonderful man named Yost, who was on the 60 Minutes show, told me that when I came the first time, he had been warned that if he talked to me, he could be fired.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. I mean, we went out to dinner, and he introduced me to the local in-season beer. I must say, they have amazingly good restaurants in this little place. You wouldn't believe, in the middle of nowhere. The staff was so warm and welcoming and helpful, and they really, really want to serve.
Oh,
there I am, saying to Gary, "Don't you dare take that picture." But there we are. That's the lady who worked with us. She speaks good English. Her name is Rosa, and I wish I could remember her last name.
So they're going to have 20 volunteers?
No, 20 employees. They're really closing their facility.
I mean, they have that many employees. I didn't think it would be that big.
Oh, they have many more than that. But there are 20 who can speak some English and could guide us, and they were wonderful. They're all local, and now for the first time they have a sense of mission. They told us they didn't know why they were working on this all these years. They knew it was important, but they didn't have a sense of why. And most recently, now they can feel it. A congressional group came before us, 11 people from Congress. And Hillary Clinton has introduced a resolution calling on ITS to help everybody. And in the House of Representatives, there's a resolution sponsored by several congressmen saying the same thing, which I think doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
And so can you do the research here in Washington? Not for a while.
Well, if they have these things digitized already, why won't they really? I mean, you said it's on the computer there, the index cards.
The index cards are, and the central index has now arrived in Washington. You can use the central index, but you won't have instant access to the files. You'll have to write to Arolson. You can look up all 25.
Well, just a minute. I thought you said the files are going to be here.
Ultimately, they will bring things. They're coming in increments. Right now, they have, I believe, the early arrest files, the pre-war stuff.
Okay.
And they're bringing more. They have a time schedule, which may be in this book. There it is. The Central Name Index was filmed by the end of 2007, and documents on incarceration, concentration camps, ghettos, and prisons. So other wartime documents will be ready for washing the middle of June 2008.
Like, yeah.
Post-war documents won't all arrive here until the end of 2009, and only beginning in January of 2010 will they start these TD files.
But I thought you said the TD files were indexed and you could look them up there.
You can look up, you can know that there's a name, but you won't have access to the file itself.
But when you go there, you will have access.
You will have access to all the records.
Okay.
You will start with the index. You won't need to know what collections these are in. They have little abbreviations at the top that tell their employees to go to the forced labor and to go to the concentration camp and to go here and go there, all over the place, and they'll Xerox and bring them. But you will not be able to do that at the Holocaust Museum or at Yad Vashem until the end of 2010, 3 years from now.
Okay.
So, plus, it isn't just that, it's that their personnel have the experience with these documents. They know what they have. They know what what those abbreviations are and those
in a
notes
way,
are.
it's much more than when you say you can get all of the Mormon church records by looking at the index and sending for a film, but it's so different when you go there and you have
It's totally the exact. In fact, you touched on it. After I spoke to Paul Shapiro, and he told me the TD files were the most valuable for genealogists, I also that very week had gotten an email message from Yakov Lazovic, the archivist at Yad Vashem, saying, by the way, Sally, likely the TD files are going to be the most valuable. So I heard it from the two people who really knew. And then after I came back from downtown, having said, I wonder if we can go, I called Gary Mokotoff and I said, you know how you take a group to Salt Lake City to do research of the Mormon files. Well, what would you think of bringing a group to Bad Arolson? That's exactly the same image.
Because you get, okay, you said it might take a half a day for them to pull something, and that's what it is there too. There's some odd records that are still in their mountain hideout.
Right.
It takes a half a day to get it, but that's all, and you've got it there, especially if you have a few days.
I mean, because I asked for something that was in one of their more distant places. I can't remember what it was I asked for, and they got it for me right away. Everything I asked for. One of our Avotenu contributing editors who lives in Jerusalem sent me a list. He had pulled from the index at Yad Vashem all these TD files. And he said, can you get them for me? Had all of them. He's since called me on Skype and said, I found the maiden name of the mother, and now it opened up a whole, this maiden name of mother is really valuable.
Of course, you can't. Otherwise, you can't go any further. I mean, we've known that for a long time. We've done so many shows on that.
And these things where all these married women, you can research by name. You can't research by community yet.
Okay, but
But on the card, it tells where they're from. Yeah. So if I'm scanning, I know all the communities in Marmaros County, Hungary.
Yeah. But you just have to keep trying your name and trying each community or something like that.
No, I just copied down all the ones that I knew were Hungary. Mostly they don't say Hungary. It says Hungary on them, and had them pull it.
That's fantastic. Well,
I'm glad you're coming with us. We have such a good group coming.
How many do you have coming so far?
It's close to 30. We're going to have. Yeah, we're going to. There's some that are. Have you already told them that you're coming?
I told Gary I was coming.
Okay,
so
because we're getting. You're on the list.
It's surprising. I mean, we just got the notice like 3 days ago that he sent out that notice.
Well, that's the hotel. ITS, bless them, negotiated a very special price.
Okay, we're out of town. We're out of time. Thank you.